There's been a lot of discussion lately about hell. And it's been good. I mean, just last week I was thinking how I'm the clay and he's the potter, and here I am, a piece of clay, trying to tell other pieces of clay what the potter's like? I mean, how does that even work? Can I really take the potter and put him in a little box? And then I think about how other pieces of clay took the potter and put him in this box. And I'm clay. Can the potter speak to this piece of clay? Or just to this piece of clay? Just to these pieces of clay? And if he only speaks to these pieces of clay, can I even question that maybe they said the wrong thing? That maybe they didn't say exactly what the potter said? That maybe when these pieces of clay said that the potter told them to go out and kill entire races of people, that maybe they got it wrong? Can this piece of clay question genocide? Can this piece of clay say that maybe the potter didn't actually tell these pieces of clay to commit genocide? Or do I need to shut my mouth and listen to what these pieces of clay say that the potter said and not ask any questions? When these pieces of clay talk about infanticide, killing babies along with children and mothers just for a piece of land, can this piece of clay say that that's wrong? Or do I need to stay inside this box just because other pieces of clay said that the potter said that this was right? Am I allowed to question the potter when he says that slavery is right? Or do I need to stop asking questions because other pieces of clay said that if I ask questions, well, the potter's going to put me in a kiln where I'm going to cook forever? Could this piece of clay be so bold as to say that rape is a big deal? Or do I need to shut my mouth and stay in this ancient book where other pieces of clay said that if you rape, it's not a big deal? Just pay the father some money and you can marry your rape victim. How does the piece of clay that got raped feel about that? Am I allowed to ask that question, or am I a heretic clay? Lord, can't you give me my own sense of who you are? Lord, you spoke to them. Are they special and I'm not? You're my father, and you won't even talk to me? You know, it seems to me that if the potter is going to speak to these pieces of clay, that he might speak to me, that he might even come down in the form of clay so that I can know what he's like. That he might even come down and say, look, these other pieces of clay, they said, love your neighbors and hate your enemies, but I say, love your enemies and don't do them any harm. And when John says no one has ever seen the potter or understood the potter, but Jesus Christ has made him known, I say to myself, maybe I should start taking the hint that what people said thousands of years ago might be wrong, it might be flawed, it might be corrupted. Even if they said what was right, how do I know that what I hold in this English text is right? How do I know it's what they said? How do I know what they said is right? And how do I know that this is what they said? So I start reading through this book, and I read about the creation, and I read how Adam, supposedly God's first child, and his wife Eve, how they didn't know right from wrong. And in this state of being, they decided to eat a piece of fruit that God told them not to eat, but they didn't know that that was wrong because they didn't know right from wrong. So they ate the piece of fruit, and it helped them to know right from wrong. And I read that their father was so enraged by this that he cursed not just them, but their children and their grandchildren and every generation after them, and a snake and the ground that they walked on and the entire earth for millennia to come. And then when I come to this story where God's people sinned and God tells his priests, he says, look, take your swords and strap them to your side and just start running through the crowds and just cut them to pieces. Your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, and don't you defy me. You just do it. And I think, wow. And then I get to the cross. And we start hearing about how God needed a human sacrifice to be happy with anybody else. He had to kill one of his children so that he could be satisfied with the rest of his children. And I think to myself, I would never even think to do that, God. I would never, ever, 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 ever do that to my children, to any of my children, and I would never need to do that for the rest of my children. What are we even talking about? This is insane. But wait a minute. Isn't the real story that Jesus Christ, well, he was the potter, and he came down in the form of clay, not to be a human sacrifice, but to show us what he was like. I mean, if there's anybody that can tell us what God's like, I would think that it would be God. And I mean, he came down and he said, bravo, everybody, you got it exactly right. That's exactly how I am. No, he said, you got it all wrong. See, you say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but that's not what I say. No one before me has ever understood me, but I'm here to make myself known. And then he breaks the Mosaic law. All those things that the clay said was good, that they said that this is how God is, this is what he wants. Jesus just breaks it. He doesn't stone an adulteress. He doesn't stop moving on the Sabbath day. He tells his disciples to pick grain on the Sabbath day. He begins to just cause a lot of tension amongst the people, amongst the clay who tried to tell me what the potter's like. And I say to myself, so that's what the potter's like. Jesus Christ. He was so much unlike the God of the Old Testament that we couldn't even accept him. We thought he was worthless, and so we killed him. See, he wasn't a human sacrifice. He was our Father. And when we decided to kill him, well, he didn't do what we would have done. He didn't lash out like we might have. He did what any good father would do. He loved us still. And he gave us what we needed to rise above our problems, our hatred, our anger, to rise above everything that we thought God was, but he wasn't. So, here I am, the clay, empowered by the potter to rise above and to say to other pieces of clay that God isn't like that. God isn't a genocide, infanticidal maniac. He doesn't want you to kill anybody. He doesn't want you to hate anybody. And he's not going to send anybody to an eternal place of torture. This is one piece of clay telling other pieces of clay not to listen to those ancient pots. This is one piece of clay telling other pieces of clay that God loves you no matter what. And all this stuff that these ancient pieces of clay told you, well, there's something crazy about it. Either it's wrong from the beginning, or they said something and it wasn't passed down right. It was passed from one person to another, in one language, to another language, to another language, to another language. And finally, somebody decided to tell you that this book is inerrant. Somehow we believe that the potter gave us the power to preserve something that people said about him that was dead wrong. So what is the church telling us about this English piece of literature, that we should believe it all and somehow make it all fit together? God hates, God loves, God kills, God gives life, God sanctions genocide, infanticide, rape, slavery, and yet somehow He tells us that we're to love one another, even our enemies. We're supposed to mush this stuff together and somehow make it work, and everybody is just in the middle of this tension. We can't sort it out. We don't know what to believe. We take our reasoning and we push it down, because God forbid our mind be higher than that. God forbid we be able to think for ourselves. Is that what the church is telling us? Take all the things that were said thousands of years ago by immature people who couldn't possibly believe that God would love the people that they hated. Take that and put it in your heart, and then take everything that Jesus said about don't hate your enemies, love them, put that in your heart, and then figure out how it fits together. Our concept of who Jesus Christ is in our churches is far different from who Jesus Christ is. Our concept of the potter in churches is far different from what the potter himself said. We got it wrong. No one ever understood him until he came along and showed us who he was. But we never left it behind. We never left our old concepts behind. We just mixed it all together and we called it churched. And so I'm going to call myself unchurched, because I got to undo all of that mess. And I've got to walk towards Christ. I've got to see Him for who He is, so that I can set aside bigotry, hate, malice, prejudice, and embrace what God has been telling me all along, that He really does love everybody, that He really doesn't want anybody to hurt anybody else for any reason. I can't do that if I have to mix all this together. So this piece of clay is walking away from church so that I can follow Christ. And I want you to come with me. Thanks to Dr. Michael and Rhonda Jones, who unchurched my mind and freed my heart from the bondage of fear. Join the movement by supporting our new show, Erasing Church. Go to www.erasingchurch.com for more information.